The Monday, February 28th Board of Commissioners meeting, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We apologize for the late start. We had matters in executive session we were dealing with. First up, we have approval of the minutes for the public meeting of February 14th. Do I have a motion to approve those?
Will they be approved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Commissioner comment? And we do have a revised copy, I believe.
Yeah, that was, I had identified a spelling error ahead of time.
And I assume that revised copy is on the back table as well?
Yes,
Okay.
it's just a typo with somebody's name.
Any changes to the minutes as stated? Hearing none. Any public comment on those minutes? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Board of Commissioners met prior to tonight's public meeting to discuss matters of personnel, real estate, and litigation. And at this point, I will go to, all commissioners were present. I'll go to Elaine Schaefer, Commissioner Schaefer, to give us an open space plan update.
Okay, well, we have tonight some members of our Open Space Committee here to give a presentation on the work that's been done on updating our plan. I want to just give a quick refresher to everyone as to why this is coming before us right now and where we've been. You may recall last fall, the Open Space Committee made a recommendation that the 1991 plan desperately needed to be updated and put together a little working research group to start thinking through and strategizing about how that would happen, putting together some research about what that would entail. They assembled that and then came back to us. That was last fall. They came to this board and they had a first steps, the first 6 months of work, presented that to this board, and we approved that work. And they have now finished that first 6 months of work and completed all those steps. And so they are in front of us tonight to report what they found and to sort of delineate what the next steps would be and seek our approval for those steps. So without further ado, we have John Fisher and Susan Byrne, who have really been the chairs of this little working group, and they're going to explain in more detail the work that has been done.
Good evening. When the Open Space Committee formed the Open Space Plan Subcommittee 8 or 9 months ago, we were charged initially with looking into the possibility of amending the 2006 amendment, or resurrecting the 2006 amendment as a way to deal with updating the 1991 comprehensive or open space plan. Several members of our subcommittee are here with us tonight, and the subcommittee included representatives from the Open Space Committee, the Implementation Committee, Park and Rec, the Planning Commission, and the EAC. As we delved into this subject, the first thing that we found out is that virtually every township in Montgomery and Bucks County has adopted a state-of-the-art open space plan within the last 5 years in response to bond initiatives in both of those counties. And we started to look at some of those plans, and it became apparent to us very quickly that a simple amendment to the 1991 plan just wasn't going to work. The 1991 plan is essentially a park and rec plan, and it doesn't deal with a lot of the issues which are really critical to open space planning in this market, in this day and age. So we are here tonight to report on the conclusions that we reached over the last 8 or 9 months and to talk about what we consider to be the next steps in this process. Okay, why do we need a new open space plan? As the CBFAC report indicated, we really have no criteria for evaluating how to either buy or sell open space. And one of the things that I would hope that a new open space plan would deal with is to provide some objective criteria for how to deal with acquisition and sale of open space. Two, as I said, the 1991 plan is really a park and rec plan, and it really doesn't deal with how to maintain the open space which we own, which is not active recreation. We need to have a plan which tells us how to maintain and what needs to be done to deal with our passive open space, such as stream bed corridors and parcels that have really environmental impact as opposed to recreational impact. Three, we all know that we face very serious financial constraints, and we need to look at ways to protect open space short of paying for fee acquisition. And by that I mean such as easements and protective covenants, things of that nature. And fourth, and probably most importantly, there is money out there for open space programs. But the first question a donor will ask you is, do you have an up-to-date, state-of-the-art open space plan? And if your answer is no, then they're not willing to consider your application. So if we want to apply for funding, we need to have a new up-to-date open space plan which really deals with the issues that are critical in today's thinking. You're on.
So what will be in an open space plan? John alluded to the idea that there are a lot of things that are not in our current plan just because of the timing and the importance of things to society at that point. So these are a list of some of the new things that that are being considered. An updated inventory of the existing open space, conservation and recreation needs assessments, criteria to guide open space decisions, and this is a big one. This is decisions to buy and to sell, but it's some form of structure and criteria so that that will be clearly delineated. And due diligence process for recording procedures for future acquisitions, so that we know what happened in the past when the people that are discussing it change, perhaps, potentially. This will provide potential uses for the $20 million bond issue as well, if we chose to exercise it. But if we don't exercise it, it's just there as a reference for when times change, and we might. And now I can't see it. Stormwater management strategies and green water and regional connection plans. This is a big piece of it. In fact, some of the groups that provide funding and grants like to know that you're connecting different pieces to different parts of different places. So these are some of the big areas where things have changed. Any questions?
Okay, what are our next steps? There are 4 actions which we think the Board of Commissioners need to take if you want to move forward with a new open space plan. First, you need to authorize the preparation of a new plan. Second, you need to form a committee or some structure for an organization which will prepare the new plan, and then Susan will address this in just a minute. Third, you need to authorize the filing of an application for a grant from DCNR to fund up to 50% of the cost of the new plan. DCNR historically has been the main source of funding for new plans, and they historically, and I emphasize historically, have funded up to 50%. I can't stand in front of you now and tell you that anyone knows exactly what money is going to be available. But our assumption is that they will fund up to 50%, and if they don't fund up to 50%, then we probably will put this on a back burner for a while. But that's an issue that we're going to have to face down the road. And the fourth issue, and this is very important, they fund up to 50%, so therefore they require a 50% match. We would ask the board to commit to fund the match. And we'll go into the dollars and cents a little bit later, but that would be the fourth action, and it's a critical action because...
John, is that a cash fund, or is that people's time and effort as part of that?
It's really both.
Okay.
What we could skip to, maybe we'll do that right away. Let's skip to the last page. We're going to foul up everybody. Let's do that. Costs and available funds. We're estimating that a new plan will cost between $40,000 and $80,000. Now, that's a huge range. I don't know that we're in a position to refine it any better than that at this point. I think we can do it for around $50,000, but until we go out for bids to consultants and decide what issues you want to deal with in a plan. Lower Merion, for example, produced a beautiful plan. It cost them $40,000 to produce the book, let alone what it costs to consult. We're not going to spend $40,000 to produce a beautiful colored book like Lower Merion's. It's just not worth it, and we don't have that kind of money. But we don't know at this point exactly what it's going to cost. So I think we can do it for 50, but I don't want to come back to you, a year from now and say, guys, we undershot the mark. So we're going to ask that you assume that it's between 40 and 80, and therefore the match would be 40. In-kind donations can be applied against that match. If we get other grants, I think PICO has a grant program, so if we can get other grants, they can also be applied against this. But what we need is a firm commitment going in. And what is driving all of this is April 20th. That is the deadline to file a DCNR grant application. They operate on an annual basis. If we miss April 20th of this year, we're looking at April 20th of next year. And the grants are...
I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Sure.
I was gonna
The grants are generally awarded in an August-September timeframe, so that's when we would know whether we get the money.
I have a question for you, then a question for Bill. You have an estimate of out-of-pocket cash from the township you're asking for 40.
40, that would be your absolute top number.
Right, but of the 40 you're asking for, do you think it's going to be 20 in cash for a consultant and 20 of people's time and effort?
No, I think the consultant is probably going to come in somewhere around 50,000 would be my estimate, and that I'm basing that. I'm also on the
Okay,
committee.
so the consultant out of pocket, our share would be 25,000. The other 15,000 would be people's time and effort on staff.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to cost 80,000 to do it
Yeah,
altogether. I think we can do it for less than that.
Right. Bill, is there anything budgeted?
No, there's nothing budgeted at this time.
We're suggesting that the funds come out of the open space fund, as opposed to the township budget.
John, excuse me,
Sure.
You mentioned the second item was to form a committee. Do you recommend that we form a committee of at-large people throughout the township, or do we pick from our existing committees?
We're going to get to that
Okay.
in just a minute.
Sorry.
In fact, why don't we, yes, I think we're back, so we have to go back to that. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so, is that the right one?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're suggesting, and this is all just a suggestion because really the cost and the scope of the project is going to be determined by how much we have to work with. But what we're suggesting is, it is a steering committee that can move and make decisions and get things done, that's being fed by citizens at large and different advisory groups and the township staff and boards. So it would be a very open process, but not so much that it never gets done. Do you understand? So the steering committee would kind of guide that, but soliciting information from groups like this and any other groups that people suggest.
We listed on this slide, I think, 19 community organizations that we could think of that we thought should have input in the process. But I don't think you can prepare a plan with a 20-member committee. I really think you need to have a much smaller umbrella organization, and beneath that, the 19, 20, and you may have other groups that we've overlooked that would have input, and then, of course, the general public beneath that. And the consultant would probably deal primarily with the committee on the top so that we could hold down the costs.
And so the advisory group would also keep a very tight rein or management on the consultant because we want to make sure it's a plan that's pertinent to Radnor and not to somebody else. So that would be another function of the advisory board.
When you establish the process, how would you sort of govern sort of disagreements? For example, and it's maybe not the best example, but some people believe pocket parks are valuable, some people don't. And when you establish your criteria, what's your vision for sorting through, the difference of opinion?
That's what the consultant would guide us with, but there is kind of a standard for that, and I don't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but there is a standard of that ratio between big open space and little open space, if you will.
But if, for argument's sake, I mean, if you got 5 people on this side of the room saying pocket parks are a good thing, and 5 people on this side saying pocket parks are not a good thing, and you have to put a set of criteria together that say you want to, in order to acquire a piece of land, it needs to meet these criteria.
Right.
What's the vision for sorting out?
Well, there's kind of the norm. And then also, the plan that we put together is not going to be done in a vacuum. It's going to have to be approved. So,
But is the steering committee going to be sort of people who vote, or is it going to be by consensus?
I would think primarily by consensus, and if there's that kind of a split, and I don't envision there be that kind of a split, but if there is, I think you'd have to say in your final report that there was a split, and there's no final decision on whether pocket parks are a good idea or not.
discuss it.
But there will be differences of opinion on some of these issues, that's clear.
But there are norms. It's defined as, certain distance to a certain area is one kind of park, and then, the larger ones are ones that you can get to within a couple of minutes, That's what we found that when we started to look at how big was big. It was big. It's very complicated. But worthwhile, we believe.
Who would be preparing the grant application? Is that a requirement? Is it required that the staff of the township do that, or could the...
We are currently working with Bill Martin and Matt Pullman on that.
Okay. So tonight, in order for you to make the April 20th deadline, it seems to me that you would need us to authorize the application to be filed.
Correct.
And also possibly to request that staff prepare a resolution creating this committee.
Correct.
But other than that, we don't have to, you're not looking for money tonight, but you're looking for us
Oh,
to
no.
move this along.
We will, at some point, you're going to have to pledge the match, because otherwise DCNR won't accept the application.
But
Let me see.
to me, it's a perfect example of spending a little bit to get a lot. Once we have a reasonable plan and we can go to these different groups, and there are lots of groups that don't necessarily help you write the plan. That's mostly DCNR. But there are lots of other organizations that provide grant money that will be accessible to us to maintain riverbeds and to make sure that we are planting the right things if that's something that the study comes out and decides that needs to be done. But it's maintaining what we have and making sure, and I think this is a big one, making sure that we know why we want to keep things and why we might not want to keep things.
John, could we put this in our 2012 budget? I mean, apply for a grant and get the grant in August, September, and then
Defer spending the money? Yeah,
Until 2/12.
I would think so. I don't know the answer to that specifically, but I think it depends on how fast you moved on the process. I assume you wouldn't want to start until you knew whether you got the grant anyway, so
Yeah.
you wouldn't be starting before September at the earliest. So I think we could probably do that. I could check with Carolyn Wallace at DCNR as to whether that would be feasible.
Let me just clarify, Bill, that the Open Space Committee as a whole, not this subcommittee of it, but recommended unanimously that we should commit this match and that it would come from the Open Space Fund, Fund number
But-
22,
no, but
not
there's-
from the general fund.
Yeah, but there's no money in the open space fund. That's used to fund the bond issue, and it's just about out. So we don't have any extra money. It's not like we had $2 million sitting there like we did before. That money has disappeared.
There is money in there.
No, but I mean, when you pay the bond issues for next year, there's going to be no money. There's no money in that fund.
Well, I guess that's a philosophical debate, whether we could spend some of that money on what I think is the quintessential open space expenditure, as opposed to spending it all on debt.
No, I agree on spending it. I'm in favor of
I think
it.
Bill
but
has something to say.
Yeah,
Robert is
Bill
waiting.
White, I actually need a couple things. I need to know, if we wanted to do this for 2011, would it be by ordinance to move funding or to create this funding mechanism? And also let us know how much money is in the open space fund.
Well, there, a couple of things. First, with regard to the money that's in the open space fund and what it's being used for, currently there is money in the open space fund, enough to do this, certainly. I think the bigger picture issue that we'll need to address is the fact that we are using 100% of the proceeds that go into that fund to pay off prior debt service. And That is made up of the transfer tax, the quarter of a percent of transfer tax that goes into that fund. And where the transfer tax activity is now, it has fallen down to the point where the debt service payments are greater than the amount of revenue. So that's one of the bigger picture issues. But to answer the question specifically, there's cash there. It's just we have a bigger funding issue in that fund that should probably be part of the discussion, at least if we're going to identify money. The other question, and maybe John could help me out with in terms of the procedure to amend the budget. I'm not sure if we'd need an ordinance or resolution, but we would need some act of the board by legislation to amend the budget to include whatever our match is in terms of cash. In all likelihood, the in-kind payroll or whatever those in-kind services are that the township would offer, those are already in the budget in forms of payroll for whoever would be helping out.
Do you need to do that for this if there was an offset? If we said to you, fine, just for argument's sake, we have to contribute $25,000. And we said, find $25,000 savings someplace else so that the aggregate budget doesn't have to change. Do you
Well,
still
you
need
might have to do a fund transfer. And that would be-
my question is, does he have to actually go through that resolution process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that is an option, and that would require an ordinance to reduce the appropriation in Fund A, create a transfer over to the Park and Open Space Fund, and put the budget in there. I would also recommend, as part of it came up in the discussion, that even if the cash isn't needed till next year, if we're going to obligate funds as part of applying for a grant, that those funds be allocated at the time the application is made, even though we may know that they're not needed until calendar year 2012, just to make sure that those monies are indeed there when the grant approval comes back.
Well, the issue is, Bob, one of the things you've been preaching to us with $1 million deficit is that we don't incur additional funding this year. What's your position on this?
I think based on this plan, I think this is a good plan for the township to have, because I think an important part, at least from my perspective, is there's a rhyme or reason of how we acquire land, that there is a policy in which is followed and people are held to that, which right now, I'm not sure, in what I've seen, I haven't seen any reasoning behind some acquisitions of properties in the past, which has created the debt issue that we have, and how now you have a fund of open space that's supposed to be going directly towards that we're paying debt for, which this particular use is actually an appropriate use of this fund instead of paying all debt out of. So actually we're investing into the future of how the township will proceed, and even record property that's ours, protect certain properties that are out there right now that I know we have heard about some of our park areas that are not designated as open space or being preserved in that particular area. This all functions as part of this, and I think also as part of the presentation, which is right on. When the comprehensive plan is updated, this will just reduce the cost of the comprehensive plan update in the future.
You had me when you said you were in favor of it. I'll make a motion that we approve $40,000.
Can we hear 80?
No, we're going to be happy with 40.
What's that?
We can't do that tonight.
It's not on the agenda?
Yeah, it's not on the agenda, but what we need a sense of the board is to get this on the agenda for the, I would say the March 14th meeting. I think that would give us time. I think we could do a resolution to commit the funds, is that right? John Rice? Can we do a resolution? Do we have to do an ordinance?
Only if you're transferring funds do you need an ordinance.
Okay,
I mean,
so by resolution on the 14th of March, we could, as a board, if we agree, we could go ahead and commit those funds in order to facilitate the grant application. And then, even if we get the grant application, as I remember in the past, that if the board decided at a later date that they didn't want the funds and to move forward, they could actually,
Yeah, you don't have to accept it.
you don't have to receive the grant. You can turn the money back, and
Mr.
it would
Chairman?
be foolish, but.
Also, too, I think you'd want to stipulate that if we aren't successful in the grant application, that money that's where it ends. There is no money that's actually set aside that can be used for something else, that it ties itself directly to the grant.
I'll make a motion that that's the sense of the board, that we support this application. and
I'll
move
second
forward.
that, but let me also add that when we bring, we can do this tonight or we can do it on the 14th. We also need to officially authorize them moving ahead with this project. And authorize them to prepare and submit with the township a DCNR application, grant application to begin with. So we have the 3 actions that we need to authorize.
And that'll be, all be on the next meeting.
And then the
I think
other
the
item,
sense that-
Elaine, is how you want to form a committee. I mean, maybe you want just to send this back to open space and tell open space to form a committee. There has to be some kind of a structure for how you want to
Yeah,
get
but
this
that
done.
really doesn't need to be formed up at this
Right
time.
now.
No, but it's an action.
Yeah.
You have to make that
Yeah.
decision at some point.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
if we plan to take members from different boards, the Board of Commissioners are the only ones that can be authorized to do that, so.
But
Now, if it's a
John's, all
subcommittee-
John's saying is they outlined 4 things they need us to do on
Understand.
slide,
Yep.
whatever
So
it is, 3.
we have a
And he
motion on
wants
the
us to
table, it's
cover
been
that.
seconded. Any further commissioner comment on this? I'm in favor of this. I think it's a prudent thing to do. We have $20 million at our disposal, but we don't have a plan. And I think it's important to have a plan before you spend any money or commit any funds, especially of that magnitude. So I'll be in favor of this. Any public comment on this motion that's currently on the table?
Very quick comment. I'm Jim Schneller from St. David's. I would ask that you at some point include language in your resolution, your ordinance, or even this evening, that any pressures from DCNR that might be characterized as aiding in global initiatives or green-type initiatives, which have been proven to be false or otherwise manipulative towards a global economy rather than an American economy, be noted by the board, perceived in the grant by the manager, whoever reviews the grant, and we keep the feds out of our township. We want to have a plan that DCNR, the state obviously, can't pressure us to take up certain policies that are really almost un-American in my opinion. Thank you.
Any further public comment?
Before we vote, just, all we're doing with this is, this motion is, puts it on the agenda to
A resolution.
proceed roughly with what John identified.
Yes.
Yes.
We're not committing any funds at this moment. We're just getting this on the agenda.
And do we need to, okay, no.
Indirecting.
Okay. No further public comment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
And I would suggest that the Open Space Committee can form a recommendation to this board as to the constitution and the structure of what the committee will be, and then we can take a separate vote on that. Okay?
Can you
Before-
clarify
Done.
that?
But that's going to be 4 or
That's
5
not
months down the
inclu-
road. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's much further. Okay.
Yeah.
John, would you,
Can I get, before I hang, let me clarify that. We need to form the committee sooner rather than later, because even though the grant's not going to be made until September or August, you're going to have to form a group that includes the 19 or 20 organizations from the community, and you're going to have to start a process of interviewing consultants. And that process takes several months. Now, obviously, the consultant bids are all going to be contingent upon getting the DCNR grant, but I don't think you want to wait until September to start interviewing consultants.
No, I was thinking we'd have an Open Space Committee meeting in the next 4 to 6
Okay.
weeks, and then bring that back
Right.
to here, have the
Yeah,
discussion.
there is some urgency, I think,
Right.
to forming the committee. I don't think it can wait until September.
John, did you mention all the members of the subcommittee who participated in this particular project?
I think I can. We have,
If you would, please.
okay, Gayla McCluskey's here. Gayla from Open Space, Cheryl Tamola from Implementation, Ann Albright in the back from Open Space, Rick Barker from Implementation. Did I miss anybody? And we have, well, Julia Hurley from the Planning Commission. We had 2 Park and Rec representatives, but they both dropped off because of other commitments. Steve Palantonio from Implementation, and I think that's everybody, isn't it? Beg pardon? Oh, Ann Poulin from EAC.
Well, thank you for moving forward with this project. I think it's very worthwhile, and extend our thanks to those who aren't here, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we'll move to public participation. Any public comment on tonight's agenda or any other issues?
Good evening. My name is Christina Peroni, and I live at 234 Walnut Avenue. I appreciate having this opportunity for public comment now, early in the meeting. I wanted to discuss some issues that have come before the zoning board, and I wanted to make not only my commissioner, Mr. Mahoney, aware of it, but other members of the Board of Commissioners. In my opinion, our community and taxpayers have been paying for the institutional growth and sprawling that's been happening over the last 10 years. It is also my belief that the systematic problem lies in the fact that until recently, the township has been reluctant to say no to institutions and to enforce our laws that have been put in place to protect the community. As well, I believe prior Board of Commissioners and zoning boards have been allowing too many special exceptions in an effort to appease these institutions. This practice must end, and the pendulum must turn towards the neighbors who are paying the tax bills. In May of 2010, Valley Forge sold their south lot to Eastern University. Both institutions were forewarned that they had no legal right to separate the parking lot prior to the sale. Colleen Price, also a neighbor, and I spoke repeatedly at Board of Commissioner meetings. As well, the township wrote them a letter forewarning them prior to the sale that there were potential violations. Colleen Price also wrote each member of the Board of Trustees of Valley Forge and at Eastern University prior to them executing the sale that they would be in violation of our zoning laws. Yet, it appears that despite being forewarned on multiple occasions, these institutions felt that if they hired their legal team, that they could bully the community into getting what they wanted despite our zoning laws. It is my belief that our community, we have laws not just for the institutions, but we have laws for everyone. And I'm happy to say that under the current administration, they put forth a zoning violation, which has now come before the zoning board against Eastern University. I have been reading and learning about our zoning laws, which is here called Chapter 280. And there's something very specifically in the first paragraph that says that the reason for our zoning laws are to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our community. And in accordance to the first paragraph, it states that we're supposed to facilitate proper density of the population, coordinate community development, prevent overcrowding of land, and prevent congestion in travel and transportation. So obviously, any changes to the institutions, these particular issues would impact them tremendously. So I continue and restate again that Valley Forge and Eastern just ignored the zoning laws and went forward. They also have a very specific provision in this, it's 280-72 on long-range plans. And I won't read it verbatim, but basically what it says is that prior to any substantial investment of property or acquisition, they should inform the public, the neighborhood organizations, private agencies, and the general public so that we have an opportunity to have a meaningful conversation. I know I came before this board many times and nobody at Valley Forge nor Eastern wanted to have those public conversations. But then when something went wrong, they decided to come before the zoning board and ask for a special exception. Okay, so in addition to Eastern's violations as a result of the sale, Valley Forge has testified that they do not have adequate parking now since they sold off their south lot. In fact, they admitted that they needed to lease parking spaces back from Eastern University. This lease of parking spaces is also a violation of our zoning laws. It's really quite simple. Valley Forge needs to have enough parking spaces to support their uses, and Eastern has no right to run a commercial parking lot and to lease the spaces back to Cabrini and Valley Forge. Just because they're doing it doesn't mean it's legal, but that's the way they've been operating. So I am delighted that Mr. Zinkowski and Mr. Rice decided to go and put forward enforcement of our current zoning laws. So this isn't anything new. It's just really enforcing the laws we already have on the books. So I went to these zoning meetings. The first zoning meeting, Eastern and Valley Forge, had a big team of attorneys, and they were there to defend their actions. And basically, they started the action by saying that myself and Colleen Price could not even speak because they said that instead Mr. Rice was there to speak, and so therefore we had no right to speak. And, you know, this is totally not true. Unfortunately, Mr. Rice said that that wasn't true, and we got to then start talking. But they wouldn't let us talk and present our case as we're supposed to be able to do and present it when all the other people come up. So anyway, they were very tough on us, and we weren't sure why they were so tough on us. And so we just kept going on, and, you know, it continued, and then we went to the next meeting. But in between, we did a little research, and Mr. Falcone, Charles Falcone, who's the president of the zoning board, I personally, in my opinion, thought he was particularly tough on us, and basically just Googled him and found out that he owns student rental properties. So I then did a right to know request and found out that he does have in his statement of financial interest that he owns rental properties, and he is listed in the 2010-2011 approved housing for students. So if you want to rent to students, you have to get approval, and both of his properties are listed on this form. So getting this information, he was also involved, I'll add, that there was a push. I don't know how it was created, but I know there was a push from people who own rental homes to change the number of students from 2 students to 3 students. Obviously, they could get more rent if there's 3 students in a home versus 2. And fortunately, Radnor's been very tough on this and holding the line. And he was involved with those meetings as well. So, you know, which is totally fine. He makes his living that way. That's all totally fine and legal. But when issues come up that have to do with institutions, that's where I got alarmed. And so I went to Mr. Falcone and asked him, as president of the zoning board, since he owned these multiple homes, if he would consider recusing himself from this debate on Eastern. Because if Eastern is able to get a special exception and there are more opportunities for more kids, that means there's less homes and more people fighting for those spots of housing. And so therefore, there's a direct relationship between getting a financial benefit and a direct relationship with the number of homes available for lease to students. What was really disturbing to me was that Mr. Ryan, who is the zoning board solicitor, said that he advised Mr. Falcone not to recuse himself, and in fact said to me that Mr. Falcone has incredible integrity and that this was not a conflict of interest. And as you all know, there's lots of we all know about conflict of interest. If you read it in our charter.
Can I ask you, did he use the exact words that he advised him not to recuse himself, or did he say that you don't have to recuse yourself?
He said, my recollection is that he advised him that he did not have to, and that that's my recollection. I can watch the tape again, but that is my recollection.
Probably after he asked the question.
Sorry?
Or probably he asked the question, do I have to recuse myself? And
Yes.
he advised him, yeah.
Correct.
He didn't do it out of the air.
No. I'm sure
question.
he asked for advice, and then he said yes. So, but he also said not only did he state his opinion, he also stated that that he's a man of incredible integrity. I wasn't impugning his integrity or stating anything about his integrity. I was stating the fact that there is a direct financial relationship between number of students and his rental homes, and therefore he should recuse himself. He stated that he only rents to, basically he was saying he doesn't rent to Eastern students. And my point was there is a mass of students available in Radnor Township, and if there's less housing and more students, there's a direct relationship between supply and demand, and we all know that stuff. We all learned about that.
That's a stretch.
Yeah.
You're stretching it.
A stretch between supply and demand. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Well,
No.
It's a debate.
Hold on.
Okay.
It's a
Let
association
me
with
just
Eastern.
continue if I
Why
can.
don't you follow, if you are this believe so strongly in this, file an ethics complaint. We have an ethics board.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to suggest, this is public comment. I don't think we need to refute anything that this person is saying. It's an opinion. And if Christina Peroni feels this way, she has a right to speak at this public meeting. I don't think we need to get into a discussion, but I'll just comment. We don't have a conflict of interest policy that would give guidance in this area. And this is one more reason to get some of this done, because quite frankly, I don't think anyone that serves on the boards and commissions in this township they're not designing criminals. They're not trying to get one up on us. But I think some guidance would help, especially in a case like this, help someone realize whether or not they should recuse himself from the discussion and vote. So I don't want to
I'm
read into what
I'm
you're
not
saying.
actually, and I appreciate that because I'm not here to defend or discuss Mr. Falcone if he should or shouldn't. What I'm going for, my next point, is that he specifically said that, that he rents to Villanova students. Well, then I did research, and in fact, he hadn't recused himself when the law school was up. So that is his decision to recuse himself, and that is any member of the public's to put forth an ethics violation or not. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to notify you of this situation. And secondly, to state that Mr. Ryan, who is in fact in charge of making sure that our laws are being upheld, and there is specific language already about conflict of interest that applies to any board because of Pennsylvania just being a Pennsylvania quasi-judicial board. There is conflict of interest language, which in my opinion, of course it is just my opinion, there is a conflict there. But Mr. Ryan, then some member of the public, Diane Edbrell, got up to speak. And Mr. Ryan shut her down and said that basically he wasn't, in my opinion, enforcing the Sunshine Act. And he said that she wasn't allowed to speak. Now, as a agency of this board, which the zoning board is, they are subject to the Sunshine Act. And so my issue is Mr. Ryan has been around a long time and has probably served our township very well. I really don't know how he served. I'm not involved with zoning, but my question, and the reason I'm here today, is to ask you for professional services. What is the process to put in place to go and put out for bid a professional service contract for the zoning, specifically the zoning solicitor?
Well,
Diane, I think what Diane was told was she didn't have standing in the appeal that was in front of the zoning hearing board.
But
They don't have a public comment period per se. It's a quasi-judicial process, and they were following those rules.
Yeah, but
Diane lived further away than our zoning states, therefore she didn't have standing.
That's actually Mr. Nagel, and maybe Mr. Rice or somebody else can speak to that issue, but they are subject to the Sunshine Act, and therefore they are allowed to speak. So, but that's not really the debate we're having. My only issue that I'm bringing before this board is whether or not we can go and put out the zoning, what is involved with a professional contract and actually asking for bids for new zoning solicitor.
Okay, we'll
Can I, let me comment. The zoning hearing board appoints their solicitor under the municipality's planning code.
Oh.
John Rice, we approve the funding of that solicitor.
Correct.
In our budget.
Correct.
So-
But the actual appointment of a zoning hearing board solicitor, many years ago, the state law was changed. So, because there can be commingling of, a township and a board, they're supposed to be independent. It's a quasi-judicial board, and some of the confusion is it ought to be clear. They sort of operate like a courtroom. I mean, that's why there's some formalities, and there's some different rules in terms of who's a party, who can speak, and when they can speak. And I think that's what was going on. They got a little confused. But the board appoints the board solicitor in this state.
And John Rice, could you just comment on the solicitor's mission as being the solicitor of the zoning hearing board? Are they supposed to be impartial to both parties? Those who are seeking some type of relief and the community?
Excuse me, John, point of order.
Yes.
You had just stated a few seconds ago that this is public comment and we're not having debate.
I'm not talking, I'm actually asking the solicitor.
John,
I'm actually asking a question. I'd like to understand this better because I actually don't know the answer. Because what's been stated here is that the solicitor of the zoning hearing board may not
stated, John, doesn't make it a fact.
No, I'm not.
If you watch the
Excuse
meeting,
me.
you would see it,
I have
Mr.
a
Spangler.
question to the solicitor. I would like his response. I just need a piece of education here. I need to understand the role of the solicitor of the zoning hearing board so I can better understand what's being presented here.
Well, the role of the zoning hearing board solicitor is to advise the zoning hearing board on the law and to basically maintain some presentation of what goes on at those hearings. And, I mean, zoning hearing boards operate, you can go from town to town to county, and they're totally different. But basically, that's the board solicitor giving them advice on the law, making rulings on objections, if there's objections, preparing an opinion once they rule on something with their input. They can meet in executive session as a quasi-judicial board and discuss the case in executive session as long as they come out and vote on it. I think the board did have a meeting prior to that last Eastern Zoning Hearing Board where they discussed the recusal request or the conflict of interest request, because that came in an email, I think, from
I did.
Christina.
I sent an email asking them to consider this.
So that was discussed ahead of time. They met in executive session, which they can do. And then they came out and we picked up with the second night of testimony. So that's the board solicitor. They're not there to represent the neighbors. They're not there to, they're supposed to be impartial, obviously, and to hear all the testimony and evidence and then to make a decision.
Okay, thank you. Christina Peroni, I'll ask you to just finish up your public comment on
Okay,
this issue.
absolutely. In summary, what it sounds like is if there is a situation where the solicitor might be a little bit too cozy with the board and the board a little too cozy with the solicitor, it sounds like we as citizens and you as the board have no power to break that down because it's the municipal planning code? Yeah, huh.
Well, you got the ethics board and you got the court system.
Well, I'm not saying that Mr. Ryan ethically did anything wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he was not supporting, in my opinion, the people of the township, which is who's really supposed to be supported in our zoning code. So I bring it to the board for your attention. I make the comments in public because I'd hope Mr. Ryan would reconsider some of his actions, and again, Mr. Falcone to reconsider recusing himself. So thank you.
Any further public comment?
This is my first, and I hope a long line of efforts to make public comment in the first session. I know you'll be glad to hear that. In the matter just spoken of, if I could emphasize something, I walked into that. My name is Jim Schneller. I live at St. David's Park. I walked into that particular hearing just to hear Diane Edbrill get chastised by Mr. Falcone right after the recusal discussion. And I'm not sure how it relates to quasi-judicial agencies, but Mr. Falcone had just been asked to recuse. There was no better time for the gentleman to treat someone with deference. Now, we all know that if someone lives on pine tree or spruce tree, that they still have a right to talk, and that really rigid standing definition is inappropriate where it's an institution. But the point I'm making is that there's supposed to be an appearance of judiciousness and decency towards the citizens that wasn't there. And I think the board has authority to vote on a sanction, or because I think if you went through the zoning board decisions for the past 18 months, you could find instances of this. I volunteer to help. I have a matter, if I could ask for the overhead projector, I have a 3-minute or less issue I'd like to talk about.
John Rice, do we have to?
Jim, is this public comment?
Yes, it's public comment on a
Okay. It's public comment.
sidewalk issue.
It's public
Okay,
comment.
The projector's up now.
Right. I've been a shopper in the town of Wayne for my 40 years, and I am here to discuss
Excuse me, Mr. Schneller, is this a matter that's in litigation presently?
This is not. I'll get right to the point. This is in regard to 103, the old Agnew Realtors, which had a unused sidewalk cafe in front of it. It was a subject of a zoning hearing board appeal I brought when the Department of Community Development would not bring the landowner in.
Jim, let me just interrupt you. This is your case, which you've appealed to the Commonwealth. One of your two cases, I think, that are now active, but this is one of the cases that's on appeal to the Commonwealth Court, that you brought in action in District Justice Court, that you then appealed to County Court, that you then appealed to Commonwealth Court. So it is something that's...
It's the property alone. There's not a single...
Well, but it's an issue that's in litigation between yourself and the township and the...
Well, it's not. This is a shade tree matter that never had time to come up because of the way the zoning board proceeded. They didn't hear any fact.
Is this like an additional issue, a shade tree issue?
It's not in the pleadings.
Well,
It's not in
okay.
anywhere.
Well,
But it results, the sole connection is, it results from a photograph that was submitted. I'm not even sure if the zoning board admitted it.
what are
Probably did.
you asking for tonight? What are you...
I'm asking for a sanction and issuance of violations for over 18 months of a covering of half of a tree square and debilitating effect it's had on the tree in total disregard for the shade tree provisions. Because they did a grading, but especially just because this half of the open ground was covered. That particular section of the shade tree ordinance required that to be reviewed by the commission. This person, and I'm afraid the Department of Community Development in some respect, permitted this covering of half the tree square in complete disregard for 3 different sections of the zoning code, one of them the saldo. And I made this complaint through the online electronic complaint form. And I got no response. I telephoned once, was told I'd be called back, and usually that results in a response, but I didn't get any.
Jim, which tree in this picture are you referring? Which one of these two?
I'm sorry about the picture.
Is that a tree?
Yes. Yes, I'm 100% certain.
And is that new sidewalk there that just put in? Or is that old
Yes.
sidewalk?
That's not a utility pole you're pointing at. That's
No,
a tree.
there aren't any on North Wayne, and that
Okay.
you
And
can tell by the snow, there is the part, where the dirt is, the
Right.
snow,
when did you make the complaint?
sometime in September, October.
All right, we'll check with the staff.
Well, we've got to do something besides check with the staff. This is an outright violation.
But-
Shade tree
Okay,
violation.
your comments are appreciated. We will have staff look at this and get back to you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the departmental reports.
Will they be accepted?
Do I have a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the departmental reports?
I sent a couple comments in ahead of time, so I'm waiting for a resolution on those. But it's nothing that would
I mean,
prevent us.
to staff?
Yeah. They were more
Okay.
typo and administrative.
I see.
I'd
Any
like to
other-
make a comment. I think tonight is Lieutenant Antonini's last night serving as the interim superintendent. So I would just like to say thank you for your service. It's been a pleasure working with you as the interim. You've been professional and efficient, and I've really enjoyed working with you, and thank you from all of us.
Elaine, thank you for that comment. And AJ, thank you again from the board. We really appreciate what you've done over the last year to help us through the tough time that we had. So thank you. Any commissioner comment on the departmental reports? Any public comment? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Move to committee reports, Public Works and Engineering. Commissioner Spengler.
Yeah, I'll move the adoption of the ordinance to award the bid for the library roof replacement to Barnes Roofing for $93,485 and authorize the township manager to execute all documents necessary for the Memorial Library Radnor Township roof replacement project.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Any further commissioner comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7 to none. That was Spengler, Commissioner Spengler motioned, and Commissioner Schaefer second on that one.
Next, I would like to move the approval of the resolution 2011-22 to purchase of an international model dump truck through the CoStar's Joint Purchasing Program for funds allocated in the 2011 Public Works Capital Improvement Plan. And the award of the bids are to authorize the purchase for a 210 International Model 7400 SFX 4x2 dump truck from GI Sarah Incorporated Conshohocken in the amount of $78,313.71, and HL DeHart dump body and central hydraulic system in the amount of $64,853 for a total price of $143,166.71. I move the approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's moved and second. Any commissioner comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7 to none.
The next is a resolution 2011-19 application for county aid. The county gets liquid fuels funds. They have no county roads. They just have 39 county bridges. They divide the money left over by population and streets, and we usually get $36,720. We're asking for $508,120. Lots of luck, and I'll move the application.
Do I have a second?
Approval of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Commissioner comment? I just have a question. Bill White, is this a significant increase in the amount that we're asking for? I always assumed it was in that 500,000 range.
Now, this is county liquid fuels. This is what we've put in for the last 20 years, and we get about $30-some thousand.
But we always ask for a lot.
We always ask for
Yeah.
as much as we're
But we only
entitled
get,
to.
okay,
Yeah.
good to understand that.
This is how much it's going to cost to do our roads, so.
So this is our attempt to get some of the county tax money back to the residents. Okay, any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7 to none.
Next item on the agenda is discussion of traffic calming in South Wayne area. South Wayne has been working with the township to try and get some speed bumps or humps on Aberdeen Avenue between Conestoga Road and Lancaster Pike. Staff traffic has recommended that we not do that, but Commissioner Curley and myself and the residents have been discussing this issue, and we're looking at the area between Pembroke Avenue and Windermere Avenue, St. David's Road, to do sort of a pilot study for Radnor Township. The staff has recommended we put in a sidewalk and probably also a crosswalk. They have recommended that we not do chicanes. But what I would like to see, because we've been discussing this for years, all right, if we're not going to put in speed bumps or humps, what's the alternative? What can we do in this area? The staff has recommended not chicanes, but I'd like to see a study done of what we could do to calm traffic in this area, whether it's bump outs, smaller chicanes, and then come with a recommendation of what we could do, what are the possibilities, what we can do in this area to calm traffic, and how much it would cost. Dan, do you have any comments on that?
Well, it's certainly something we can go back and look at and continue to explore. The big concern that we had was narrowing the road any more than it is. We realize that there is room to narrow the street down. Our concern is there is some limit where we're going to start, by narrowing the road down, we're going to start having side swipes, and I don't think a head-on collision, but certainly mirrors knocking into each other. That's our big concern with the chicanes or the bulb outs.
Yeah.
On the block that you just mentioned, there is a change in elevation in the road. There's a high point in the middle of the block that also contributes to some sight distance issues. So again, necking the road down, causing vehicles to have to maneuver different than what they would normally expect is a concern to us.
Yeah. Well, what I would like to see is that, maybe we could work with a traffic engineer or yourself, or you can come up with ideas, what can we do there? and, if we can do a bulb out instead of a 4-foot, or if maybe it's a 2-foot. I noticed there was a car parked there today. You can't park on the other side of the street because it's one way, but certainly, I would like to see what we could do on that block to restrict traffic and to calm traffic down, and what are alternatives that we could do. We can go back to neighbors, discuss all them with them, and come up with something, and then find out where we're going to get the funding from. But I would like to use this as a test area because, if we're not going to put speed bumps there, which I haven't been in favor of, I'd like to come up with an alternative. And not an alternative that can be used throughout the township at this time where we've got to write specs for the whole township, but just to use this block between Pembroke and Aberdeen as a test area to see, when we do have the smaller Radnor Township streets, what can we do there? Any creative idea that we can do and what it would cost, I would like to try and get a better handle on that. I understand about the chicanes, the bump outs, I think maybe we might be able to space them. I'm not traffic, far enough apart that you don't have to curve. You can just, but it would force you to slow down, or any other mechanism that we can to control traffic on that block. So if you could take a further look at that, staff try to take a further look at that, and if we get an idea from a traffic engineer, if we have to pick somebody else's brain and maybe go to a consultant and have them look at it and review and look at the block, or maybe there's enough information there. But
Well, I certainly, Lieutenant Antony and myself and staff traffic can take a look at some other alternatives. There's the Pennsylvania handbook on traffic calming that we can go back and look through there again. I mean, we have looked through it many times, but we can certainly reapproach that. And if we're coming up empty, I can certainly talk to McMahon and Associates. They're our traffic engineers, and bounce some things off of them.
Yeah.
Dan, it's my understanding that you did use the time since the last meeting to essentially do that, to look at this, and you, on the phone, you told me some recommendations that you had, so I think it's appropriate for you to elaborate on that now.
Well, there's a couple things where we talked about extending some sidewalks on both streets, South Aberdeen and South Wayne. We did look at both streets. I had suggested, and Lieutenant Antonini did not agree with me, about a bike lane. That creates the same issue about necking the road down, making it more narrow. Basically, over on South Wayne Avenue, what I see as an issue is the cars turning off of Conestoga, heading westbound, leaving Conestoga at a fairly high rate of speed, turning on to South Wayne, and continuing at that high rate of speed. What I would suggest is we do some, put in some flexible delineators at that corner to make it more of a sharper turn that will force cars to slow down. So as they enter South Wayne, they are coming on at a slower rate. As many of you may remember, there used to be a tree there. The tree died, and as the pothole grew, blacktop was thrown in and just widened that turn. So at one point in time, there was a large obstruction that kept people making the turn slowly. Again, South Wayne Avenue, there's 1.5 homes that could use some additional sidewalk, so that would allow people to continue all the way up to Conestoga on the sidewalk on both sides of the street. And that was pretty much what we had come up with.
I have a question about your concern about the narrowing of the road. The whole point of a choker or a bump out is to narrow the road. So, and I looked in the Pennsylvania's traffic calming manual, and for a road of this nature, it says 18 to 20 feet for 2 lanes. And on Aberdeen, we would be able to get 18 to 20 feet for a bump out.
Well, we're at 21 feet now.
Yeah, so we would be able to create or 21 feet in some places, more than 21 in others, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
But the block that we're talking about, this block between Pembroke and Upland, is 21 feet.
Very good. So the way I see it is there's nothing that I saw that would technically prohibit bump outs at any location, particularly bump outs at the intersections, because the speed should be 0 at the intersections. So do you disagree with that? I mean, I sense that you did from our private conversation, but
Well, if we're talking about a bump out that's a total of 3 feet, I don't think you're going to get the results that you're hoping to get. I mean, if we're talking about changing a road width that's 21 feet now and making it 18 feet, I don't think that you're going to see the effect. I think if it was a 36-foot wide road and you did something drastic like that so it was clear that there's a change, absolutely. I think you're going to get the effect that you're striving for. I don't think anyone is going to notice 3 feet.
okay, so it's not that you believe it's technically insufficient, you just believe that it's not warranted because you don't believe it will have a positive effect.
I don't think people would see that small change. Now, we didn't spend a lot of time on the bump outs. We did have this conversation on Friday. The chicane issue was that it makes cars weave in and out.
Yes.
So our concern was we're directing cars, we're making the road narrow, and we're directing cars into oncoming traffic.
Right, but that's what a chicane is supposed to do. So, I mean,
But it's
all
not
chicanes do that.
Well, but the road is supposed to be wide enough to allow you to stay in your lane. And our concern...
I don't believe I mean, I respectfully disagree. I think the road is supposed to be 24 feet wide so that you have two 12-foot lanes, and then as long as you maintain two 12-foot lanes, then you have a properly designed chicane.
But we don't have two 12-foot lanes.
Yes. Okay, very good.
Commissioner, one of the easiest and quickest ways we've done this in the past is to put a double yellow line. Gives the impression of narrower lanes and tends to slow people down. There are studies with that, and we have done that in the township. Some residents object to that, though, because it makes it seem like a highway and not a regular residential neighborhood. But that is something else to think about.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, I'll just tell you what I think. I think I need to get very particular with staff, and then I need to get very particular with the residents about what I think should be there, and then work with Commissioner Spengler, and then we'll decide if as a board, if we want to do that. But I think the next step is for us to come up with a very detailed, not a detailed design, but a very particular choice for you as a board to make, and then you make that decision. But I think we do have to get very particular on, we've been very general and it's very appropriate, but now we have to pick locations and get particular about, the mechanism that we're going to recommend. So does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
Can I just ask one quick question that is not specific to this area, but does that Pennsylvania handbook address the use of rumble strips? I mean, is that something that you've ever seen used? I know I've mentioned this before that, over on Darby Paoli, they're tremendously effective. Now, they're used there to keep people in lane, but I'm thinking, taking that turn onto South Wayne Avenue, it's really just alerting people that now you're in a neighborhood. And, a rumble strip, that's what it does. It alerts you. And I haven't really seen them used as traffic calming.
But it certainly would do that, but I wouldn't want to live next to it.
Yeah, neighbors wouldn't want it.
Because
And
they're
I did
loud.
look at it.
Listen to it all night.
I don't think that the manual supports that application.
doesn't.
It's my opinion looking at it. It supports applications and it supports other applications, but I wouldn't read it to support that
In a
particular
residential.
application. Yes.
Okay.
I'm curious, Dan, does the manual deal at all with dividers between lanes? It sounds like it'd be god-awful expensive, but I know that was an idea that was kicked around years ago, as opposed to narrowing from the sides, forcing the cars to get close to each other. Actually put a physical barrier at various points along the road in the middle, so you're keeping cars apart. Has that been looked into?
I don't believe that that's on the list, but we talked about doing that on Lancaster Avenue. The concern I have is, once you start it, you really need to continue. You can't start and stop because you're creating these obstacles that someone could run into.
Right, if you only had them every so often, the car could drift and run into it.
Right, and
Makes
then
a lot
it
of
prevents
sense.
left turns, so people who live there wouldn't necessarily be able to turn into their driveway.
I also point out that when Dan and I went out there, there are a lot of driveways and they're very close together. So trying to space the chicanes or even like a barrier, like you said, is going to be very hard for the residents to deal with either the chicane or especially a barrier. They have to back out, be real careful they don't back out into it if they do back out. And of course, they can only go one way up and around.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, too, it is not, in my opinion, and correct me, John, if I'm wrong, you cannot create issues just to slow traffic down. It's not legal, so there becomes a liability upon the township. If it's challenged in court, we will lose. That's like putting up extra stop signs. If it doesn't meet the warrants of the traffic code, it is not legal. As strange as that seems, you cannot do things to put up to intentionally slow traffic down. So I think what we've got to do is be careful as we look at this of how we can do that, serve the purpose that we need to do to slow traffic. But again, too, as part of that, even the bigger issue, I think, and I know Lieutenant and I have spoken in regards to this, is the way we enforce speed in this state. And I think there has to be some changes in the law at the state level to allow us to do certain things. So, there's a lot that has to work into this so that we just can't engineer things or put them in place to intentionally slow traffic. Because again, if challenged, it'll be found to be illegal. That will all have to be removed.
But we had a speed study done, and all 3 segments exceeded the criteria for speed humps. So I see nothing that would prevent us from slowing traffic intentionally in any of these segments. Somebody tell me if I'm incorrect.
So what you're saying is what staff traffic come up with was incorrect?
No, staff traffic won't repudiate that fact, correct? All 3 met the speed criteria. The 85th percentile was beyond our limit in all 3 segments. The criteria that was not met was a critical length.
The length, you're correct in some of it, and that was made after much discussion and criteria put forward at prior boards. And in fact, that criteria was lessened from what we originally put out there. I believe there was 1 section that didn't meet the speed, but I believe there was 2 that did.
So what we could do is maybe on Commissioner Spengler's recommendation, allow the staff to further look at this to come up with an option, because also there's going to be a cost associated with this of how we fund these improvements. So we can work on that and come back with a recommendation either at the 14th or 28th meeting back to the board with something that will meet the criteria, meet the code, and do what we're looking to try to accomplish in that particular area.
There's one thing I didn't hear discussed was an elevated median strip. Because the issue I heard was that vehicles could clip each other's mirrors, because if you do bump outs, you're forcing cars together. But what I didn't hear was any discussion of actually using traffic calming measures, but keeping separation in the road using a median strip. And there's a limit. The median strips generally have to be 4 feet in width, but I believe the cartway is 28 feet in some places. The other option I've seen in use is these faux speed tables that they're painted on the roadway. They look like a speed bump, but they're not. And they generally work well when you have a lot of cars passing through the area that are not from the neighborhood. So the neighbors may continue to speed or learn from seeing that, but if you can slow down 1 out of every other car, you're better off. So just some thoughts.
But,
So staff will look at this?
Yeah, staff will look at it. Don and I will work with them, because I think we can probably be creative and put a couple bump outs there. But let's work with staff and work with our traffic consultant and see what we can come up with to physically slow traffic down. Thank you. That's it for, I'm sorry, anybody in the public want to discuss this?
Hi, I'm Sarah Shano. I live at 205 South Aberdeen. I have a question about what segment we're talking about here. I heard Commissioner Spengler say we're talking about the segment that goes from Pembroke to Windermere/St. David's, because the name changes there. But I heard Mr. Malloy talking about the stretch that only goes from Pembroke to Upland. That's a shorter stretch, and it seems to me it's a narrower stretch. What are we talking about, and also what is the width of the segment from Upland to Windermere?
We looked at all the sections from Conestoga Road down to St. David's, and most of that width is anywhere between 20 and a half feet to 22 feet, most of it being right at 21 feet. And again, when you put chicanes and you put speed bumps, you got to be real careful how close they are to segmenting roads, roads that are going off it. You just can't put them right up to the road. So again, using all that criteria, whether chicanes or speed humps and driveways, you have to take into consideration driveways, you're pretty limited in those stretches. So we did look at all three sections of the roadway.
Okay. I also want to comment on, I'm not sure whose comment it was, the notion that the residents are not going to want to drive over or around, whether it's a raised median, a bump out, a chicane. If you ask the residents on South Aberdeen, I don't think that's going to be the case. The petition, when we sought a petition from the residents on South Aberdeen, we got a landslide. It was overwhelmingly supported. So I really don't want that to be a consideration in what's being recommended, that the residents aren't going to want to drive over things or have it near their driveways. The residents are very concerned about the speed that traffic is constantly going on our street. We are right near St. Catherine's School. We're right near two churches. We're right near the middle school. And it's really an unsafe stretch of roadway. So we really do need to, as Commissioner Spengler said, come up with some kind of solution that is going to work on this street to calm the traffic, because walk out there any time of day or night, it's zipping. Thank you.
Any further public comment on this discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Sandy Karate, South Wayne. My family's lived here 25 years. We've raised our kids here, and we've seen a lot of changes. We actually rode our bikes on the Blue Route. And what we've noticed is, because of all we always had traffic for school and churches, but because of all the restaurants that have been approved by the commissioners or by zoning, we have seen an incredible increase of traffic on our street, South Wayne Avenue. And I can commiserate with Aberdeen. I think the whole South Wayne area should be looked at, not just Pembroke to Aberdeen. Part of Don's area too, in a way of getting some calming to the traffic. South Wayne Avenue is one of the streets that's walked on the most by businesses and kids. We've had a kindergartner hit. We've had a young man killed, and we've had quite a few accidents. And a neighbor was walking her daughter to the corner of Audubon and South Wayne, and a car went between her and her granddaughter. So we really need the study, and we need the study of that whole area. Maybe not unsafe calming methods, but street trees could help us. The sharper entry into South Wayne, some stop signs. I mean, when I'm gardening, I just watch almost accident after accident, and the Radnor police have been excellent at trying to stop it. But right at Audubon, you just see, because there's a hedge there and it comes in at an angle, you just see one car after another. And we've had death, we've had injury, and we really need some help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that I see in the staff recommendations, because I think they're really at the heart of safety, even as opposed to traffic calming. Looking at South Aberdeen, which is extending the sidewalks, because it's much better to have children and pedestrians on sidewalks than in the street still with slower traffic, no matter by what means. So I think that's an excellent recommendation. AJ also mentioned the double yellow lines, which is down there. Similarly, on South Wayne, extending the sidewalk on the west side of the street so it goes all the way to Conestoga will work well, which is recommended here. In addition to whatever neck out where that tree existed on the corner of South Wayne and Conestoga to slow the traffic that's coming off and still maintaining speed, what I would also recommend is extending the sidewalk there. The sidewalk ends on my property at that corner, and if it extended up Conestoga, perhaps the Brook Road, because that's where people cross for the trail, I think that gives the drivers a better sense of the curve there, because right now, they almost ride up on the sidewalk because the sidewalk comes up on them. They have no sense of where it is when they make that turn. The fog lines are not painted well there, so they cut that turn, and you can be literally standing on the sidewalk and almost get hit by a car there. So in addition to whatever turning mechanism you put in there, if you extend those sidewalks a little on Conestoga, I think that would help a great deal. Now, that only helps northbound traffic on South Wayne. Southbound traffic on South Wayne, there's, other than the sidewalk to get people off on the west side, you still are not having any calming measures. So per what Sandy just said, whatever overall calming measures we can look at within the legal requirements would be appreciated. Thank you.
Any further public comment on this issue?
That's it under Public Works.
Okay, thank you. Community Development, Commissioner Curley.
Yes, Mr. Zankowski, would you just give us a little background on item E?
This is just to put this out again to the board and to the public. You authorized both of these ordinance. They were introduced in January. You set a date that night, March 14th, 2011. We received this week some comments from the Delaware County Planning Commission on at least a student housing ordinance. The floodplain ordinance, I'm not sure we've gotten any more comments, but just to let the board know that this is on your next meeting agenda for both of these for public hearing.
Very good. So there's no action required from the board?
No.
Very good. I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Curley. Public Safety, Commissioner Mahoney.
All right, the first thing on the agenda is Resolution 2011 to purchase 25 portable communication radios and accessories for use in the police department. AJ, you want to give us a rundown on this?
As I mentioned in the proposed legislation sheet, our radios are hitting 16 to 18 years old. Put that in a little perspective, though they're very quality radios. I don't think anybody here has a cell phone, a laptop, or even a TV that's 16 to 18 years old. We are losing some of the portables now due to age. We cannot repair them. The ones we are repairing are coming back once, twice, and they're costing a lot of money to start to maintain these radios. On top of that, the county is going forward with the narrow banding per the FCC. For those who don't know what that is, they're making the 25 spread megahertz on the radio waves down to 12.5. And though we are getting communications through with the county, the signal is definitely degraded and it's not top quality. So at this point, I would even argue that it's a public and officer safety issue with the radios. These radios have been a priority for us for the past several years. They've been pushed back. We've been unable to order them. And again, this was my #1 capital priority for both the officer and public safety and our need. Also, you'll see in there we have, I have a request for 5 encrypted radios in case we need to do a tactical entry or any tactical communications so people can't hear what we're talking about. For you who don't know, you can pick up your iPhone and get an app and listen to any police scanner on your iPhone, so it would not be a good thing for us to do a building entry and the guys knows we're coming and what we're talking about. So again, I'm requesting, it is budgeted in the capital budget this year in that amount.
And this is a proposal to purchase these from the CoStars, which is the cooperative sourcing to achieve reductions in spending program.
That's correct. They are, Motorola is on the CoStars program. Radio Communication Systems is the sole provider in Delaware County. This radio is being used throughout Delaware County. We did test it. The officers were satisfied with it. I was satisfied with it. And they're actually providing the radios to us at less than CoStar's price.
And this is to authorize the purchase of these for an amount, excuse me, not to exceed $34,934.10. So I'll move the approval of the resolution.
Second?
It's been moved and second. Any commissioner comment?
Excuse me.
Any public comment?
Oh, just a second. One quick question. Does this help with that issue we have of not being able to communicate between fire and police and the counties and that stuff?
Though we will have enough channels to communicate back and forth, the intercommunication is usually handled through the county. It's gotten much better in the past 5 years. And we do, talk back and forth per se. But is it the magic bullet? No, it's not.
Mr. Chairman, I think just on Commissioner Nagel's point, it's something that we should look at, and I know given the rainstorm that we had back in October, it was very obvious there of the lack of the ability to communicate amongst departments. So this is a good step, and I would like to commend Lieutenant for taking a firm stand that this is something that needs to be addressed with the police department with the communication. So I do want to recognize Lieutenant.
Okay. Actually, AJ, I have a question. Do the fire departments possess these types of radios as well, so they can actually contact the police directly, or does it get relayed through Delcom?
It gets relayed through Delcom, but in this age of Nextel and command posts and NIMS, we're never very far from the fire department. Usually what happens in 99% of the cases, except for that one time where we had all the windstorms and we were just busy going from one place to another, is you set up a command post, you're right next to the fire chief, so you have instant communications. If we need to relay something back and forth, we can go through the county, or again, the sergeants and myself, if Chief Kelly or the other chiefs on the Nextel.
All right. Okay, any further commissioner comment? Public comment on this? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7 to none.
The next item is resolution number 2011-21. It is a resolution to purchase, again pursuant to CoStar, is a 2011 Dodge Charger to replace a vehicle that was lost in floodwaters. The amount would be $24,304.86. AJ, any comment?
Now, again, the money is budgeted this year. We used some extra money and part of the replacement check from last year to purchase this vehicle. And again, it's just to replace a vehicle that we lost last year.
I move the approval of the
Second.
resolution.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any commissioner comment? Any public comment? Okay,
Mr.
seeing
Chairman.
none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Got to be
I
faster.
thought Bob was going to.
That's fine. No, I just want to add on that appreciate working with the lieutenant on this. Some of the details with this car will be a unmarked vehicle, which I believe will be very beneficial in looking at some of the speed issues too. And if we can get just the state legislature allow us to run radar that now only in the state patrol is allowed to run, it would be nice and be very beneficial for us also as well. But I think this car should pay some dividends, especially with speed as well as the amount of vehicles that run red lights here in town.
Okay. All right, item number H is off the agenda, I understand. And
Yeah,
last,
that was covered at the last meeting.
right. And the last item I wanted to talk about, it's not on the agenda, is that the Radnor Fire Company Auxiliary is hosting a breakfast buffet on Sunday, March 13th at 8 a.m. through 12 noon at the firehouse. Adults $7, children under 10 are $4, and children under
Good, I
2
don't have to do
eat
it.
for free. So if you can make it out, it's obviously for a great cause. That's, again, it's Sunday, March 13th, 8 a.m. to 12 noon at the firehouse for the breakfast buffet. That's it for public safety.
Thank you, Commissioner Mahoney. Finance and Audit, Commissioner Higgins.
The only item on the agenda is the schedule of bills payable identified as 2011-2B. Grand total for authorized disbursement of $1,052,503.33, and these are within the budgetary limits for 2011. So I make a motion to approve.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any commissioner comment? Any public comment? Seeing none. Any staff comment? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Under Personnel Administration, we have 2 vacancies on the Garrett Hill Implementation Committee. Please send your letter of interest and resume to the Township Manager, Bob Zinkowski, at 301 Ivan Avenue, Wayne, Pennsylvania 19087. And my last item are the request for waiver for room rental fees. At our prior meeting, we approved a room rental policy. And what we have here pursuant to that policy are 2 requests for waivers of fees. The first one is from Representative Greg Vitale. He would like to present a meeting on electrical generation choices. This is appears to be an important opportunity for education of the public. And the second item is a request from the Girl Scouts of Eastern Pennsylvania. They are requesting to also to use space here without paying the fees. Mr. Zinkowski, did you want to comment on these?
Sure. Both of these we recommend approval. One is with the Representative Vitale when he looks at, the program of, I guess we'd call it deregulation, to look at all the options for residents. This is a good program, I believe, for residents to learn more about what has happened here. I'm sure many of you, if you're still with PECO, have seen your bills go up. So here's some options to further understand that program. And again, the Girl Scouts have done an outstanding job in this community as well. And again, they are very limited with dollars, and the use of just room space here for both of these groups, I think, deserves the fee waiver.
Move the approval of the waivers.
It's been moved and seconded. Any commissioner comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That's it for Personnel Administration. Parks and Recreation, Commissioner Nagel.
Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. in this room, we will be having a meeting of the Parks and Rec Committee of the Board of Commissioners. We will be talking about the potential lease to Agnes Irwin of Memorial Field, and then we're also going to be talking about township facilities, specifically the Willows Sulpizio Gym and Kreutzberg. Next thing is we've been notified that TD Bank, once again, will be sponsoring our summer concert series, and that's very positive. Also, we are hiring for summer camp, and if someone's interested, they can check it out online as they can check out all our programs too. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Nagel. Commissioner Schaefer, Library.
No report.
And Public Health, I just would like to ask that at the last Public Health meeting, the sense of the committee was that we invite in the members of the Delaware County Council to discuss the opportunity for County Board of Health. And they wanted to know if staff would be interested in inviting in the council members either to a Board of Health meeting or to the Board of Commissioners to discuss that service. So I guess unless any commissioner feels differently, I'll just ask Bob that he maybe make a contact with the Delaware County Council. Any old business?
I have one item that I just want to take note of. In our packets this week, we got the information, the year-end numbers for deer accidents. And it turns out there were 90 accidents in our township in 2010 where a vehicle hit a deer and killed the deer. So out of curiosity, I went and looked back to see if that, where that falls in the spectrum. And it turns out in 2009 there were 78. So last year there were 90. In 2009 there were 78. In 2008, there were 54. In 2007, there were 48. So, you know, I in the southern part of the township, we get this a lot. I mean, it's a problem, and it's getting worse. And it's not your imagination. It actually is getting worse. The numbers bear that out. So I do think it's something that it bears looking into. I know our neighbors, the Haverford have some hunts, and Lower Merion have some hunts. They're very expensive. So it's something we're going to really have to think through if we want to try and manage our deer population. But I just do want to put it out there that, you know, the numbers do bear out that this is a problem that is getting worse. And
the problem has been greatly magnified since they started working at the old Haverford Hospital site.
Right. So it's something for us to discuss, to think through. I encourage anybody who has suggestions to, you know, contact me or staff. But I would like to put this on our list of conversations to have.
We should refer it to Board of Health, shouldn't we?
Well, this was in Board of Health's hands for several years, and that's how we ended up with the deer hit studies. And the Board of Health did discuss this issue, and they looked at possible solutions to the issue. I think what would make sense is to ask the Board of Health to come to us with some recommendations, but I think it's also under a traffic safety or public safety issue. As I recall, the Board of Health at the time, they looked at the various strategies. They looked at culling, and they looked at using trapping and various methods, and it seemed like, as I recall in those meetings, they basically said that when you do those things, that the deer population actually just recovers. You get a temporary fix, but you get a full recovery because it is a natural ecosystem, and the deer actually will just figure it out. So what limits them is their food source, and there isn't any. The only question is, what could we do from a public safety standpoint, maybe to eliminate this issue for drivers. We do have signage throughout the township, but I think there may be a need for more creative mechanisms, maybe some electronic devices that scare deer away or some other technology. But I'll certainly be glad to ask the Board of Health to look at this again and come to us with recommendations, and maybe at the same time we'll include staff traffic in that.
it's great. I think it would, as far as the efficacy goes, it would be useful. Haverford and Lower Merion are both, I think, in year 2 or 3 of their programs, and they have done counts and to see, you know, is it true that the population, so it would be very instructive, I think, to see if maybe our Board of Health or Traffic can look at those results.
Are they doing culling?
Pardon?
Are they culling deer? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Are you sure they're not chasing deer into rat?
Well, that could be. I mean, that
It
could be
seems
what's
like
happening.
If our numbers keep going up and these are going down, I'm
Right.
starting to wonder, so.
Well, AJ's already left the meeting, but I don't recall that this has been on staff traffic at any time in the recent past. So, Bob, if you could ask staff traffic to take a look at the trend, which obviously is up, and ask them for some recommendations from a traffic safety standpoint as to how we can deal with this. Okay, thank
I
you.
think we need to have an integrated approach with our neighbors also. I've been talking to the Haverford Commissioner that abuts my district and trying to see if there's a common approach we can take to this.
Years ago, we had a group of township representatives. Troy Differin was involved in it, I recall, and I believe Lower Merion and Haverford. I think Dan Malloy was involved with that. And there was discussion about sterilization procedures and things of that nature. Perhaps we could pick Dan's brain on that, whoever the representative was. I think it was Dan, though.
Okay, any public comment on that issue?
Yeah, Rick Barker, 920 Lewis Lane. I'd just like to add, this is also an environmental issue and a stormwater issue. Anyone who's been an observer of our forest environment will realize that the understory is gone. It's just gone. Places where, when we first moved here, you couldn't see the house next door. Well, it looks like they've moved the house up because, again, there's the tall trees and the few things they don't eat, and that's about it. And so there's been a dramatic impact over the past. Again, it probably follows the traffic, the deer hit study pretty closely, but there's been a dramatic, reduction in the quality of our woodlands and particularly forest undergrowth.
Thank you. Okay, any other old business? Any new business?
Just two quick announcements. First is I wanted to call everyone's attention to the fact that the Radnor patch is up. So for those of you who are local news junkies, which most people in this room are, I know, patch is up and running for Radnor. It's a internet, interactive local news source. Just get on the line and put patch in, and Radnor just got its own site today.
And who's the editor?
And Sam Strike, our ex-beat reporter, is the editor. So, and then the other announcement I'd like to make is that REACH, the community group that is partnering with the Township and the school district and others on drug and alcohol in adolescents issues, is having two events coming up. One is on Tuesday, March 15th, and that will be at the Wayne Train Station Coffee House, which is called Fabio and Danny's, 7 to 9 p.m., and that's a coffee and conversation. Sergeant Block will be there with us, and it's a very casual, conversational scenario type thing. The second event is in April in this building, April 5th, Tuesday, April 5th, and that is a more formal panel of professionals. And that will have our police, our district justice, our high school is presenting some results of a survey, as well as an emergency room doctor and an addiction specialist. And we'll be talking about kind of the state of affairs in drug and alcohol use today. So I encourage you, anyone who's interested in this, to come to both events.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. Any further new business? Okay, we'll move to public participation.
Baron Gemmer, South Wayne. Just wanted to clarify a couple things going on this week. Is tomorrow, Park and Rec, that will be televised, is that correct? Great, and then for people following the schedule, Harb is the next day. If I'm looking at Greg Vitale's request, that is the following day, Thursday the 3rd, correct? And 4 to 6, I don't see, all I see is like laptop and no projection. Is there any chance that that would be televised either by the Township or by Channel 21? That would probably be a very worthwhile endeavor.
I think it's normally recorded. Bob, do we have a plan to broadcast that meeting?
I can check on that and see. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think especially, particularly looking at the hours of it, I think it would be well worth taping it to be rebroadcast at other times for folks that can't make it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
I would support that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Come on, we need some.
Move we adjourn.
We adjourn.
Okay, we're adjourned.